Hello Restoration Fellowship, we are Daniel, Jana, and Oliver Ross. We serve with First Love International, and we have lived in Ukraine since 2011. Our ministry has been partnering with Ukrainian Christians to provide Christ-centered homes for orphaned and abandoned children. Our main focus is Safe Haven Transition Home, a place for teens who are aging out of the state-run institution where they can learn to adapt to life on their own. Safe Haven is run by our amazing partners Bogdan and Anya. In the past 20 years, Bogdan and Anya have had over 80 young people live with them after graduating from the orphanage. With Safe Haven and with other ministries through the years, we did a lot of camps, building trips to help Ukrainians who wanted to foster and adopt. We did backpacking trips, and so much more. All of that was before 2022, before this current phase of the war. In 2022, Russia launched their full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and it drastically changed our lives and our ministry. We moved to the Czech Republic to help those in the Safe Haven community, mostly women and children, who fled there as refugees. We lived in Czechia for 2 years, but have recently moved back to Ukraine indefinitely, and it is so wonderful to be home. There's so much need here, and we're happy to be back and serving. Most of the group that fled to the Czech Republic at the beginning of the war has already returned to Ukraine, including Anya and most of her kids. Safe Haven house dad Bogdan has been volunteering with different groups across the country since the beginning of the war, including a medic team that we actively support, the Hospitaliers. Members of this group take rotations to evacuate wounded off of the front lines. When the group needs help driving, Bogdan will step in and go spend a rotation on the front. These teams are amazing, and we're glad to provide finances to help them with gas and food and medical supplies, and also constant vehicle repairs. On another note, Bogdan and Anya are looking to adopt, even in the middle of a war. They just have huge hearts for the most vulnerable kids. Adoption is a long process, and bringing new kids into the home is a challenging transition. So please keep Anya and Bogdan in your prayers as they navigate this journey. Right now, they're being shown folders of adoptable kids. Please pray for wisdom and guidance. So before the war started, Jana and I were in the process of starting a small business selling used English books. The goal of the business will be to help us provide some in-country funding for our ministry projects, including Safe Haven Transition Home. We have had 2 book fairs thus far since we returned at private schools that have an emphasis on English. Those book fairs went really well, and the people who came expressed how happy they were that something like this exists, where they can access English books at affordable prices. We are still realizing how much work it's going to take to get a business started. It is exciting, but it's also daunting. There is so much destruction in Ukraine. Many people in the villages around Kyiv lost their homes and more during the Russian occupation. Recently, I was able to take a trip up to a small village north of Kyiv with a friend of mine. The people who live there are mostly elderly, low-income subsistence farmers. No threat to anyone. There was a small company of Ukrainian soldiers who were positioned near the village, and they harassed the invaders. And so the Russian forces called in the jets and the helicopters to attack the village. I saw dozens and dozens of homes that were completely destroyed. This all took place over 2 years ago, but it seemed like every home that I saw had been damaged in some ways. If the house wasn't completely blown up, the roofs were busted, the windows blown out. Now, there have been groups that have come in and helped out, but there's still so much need. For example, there was an elderly couple whose home was hit. The couple survived, but the wife's leg was severely injured. She went to live with relatives near to the city, and the husband insulated their roughly 6x8 shed and lived there for that first period. Later, someone provided a container house that was maybe 200 square feet, but not in great condition. Their home has been cleared off the foundation, but they're still living in that tiny container house 2 years later, and the stairs are excruciatingly difficult for the woman to navigate in her condition. My friend Dima has been helping the people in this village for the past 2 years, and these are the kind of people that he would like to be able to do more to help. They are retired, they could never find jobs that would allow them to build up enough income to build a new home. Plus, they have to stay home and work their small farm so they will have enough food and wood to make it through the winter. Visiting the village was eye-opening. The groups that have assisted most people have been asking the question, what do these people need right now? A very important question. They're typically thinking about what is needed to help this family or this person make it through the winter. But that means that a lot of the assistance that has been given has been band-aids for much larger problems. I'm hoping to work with Dima to address more of the root problems. This elderly couple, they need a house, not a temporary one. They need a permanent house, and one that is handicapped accessible. These are big projects. So many big projects, and it feels overwhelming. But we really want to help those who don't have the resources to rebuild on their own. I can't think of a better way to use my skills as a builder than to help families affected by this unjust war. So right now I'm at our apartment on the edge of the city. You may be able to see right behind me. There's a part of a military installation that was struck by 4 Russian Grad missiles in the first months of the war. Even closer to my right is another building that was struck. A piece, this one, of one of those missiles went through one of the panes of one of our windows, right next to where the camera is sitting. We are currently far from the front lines, and most of the time it is peaceful here. In fact, these 2 strikes are the only ones that have happened in our neighborhood, and they were all in 2022 when we weren't even in the country. But that's just our neighborhood, and that still shook up the people who were here during that time. This past winter, there were 3 strikes very, very close to Safe Haven that shook everyone up literally and emotionally. In January, Bogdan sent me this video. Safe Haven is right on one of the most common flight patterns for airstrikes. When the sirens go off in the middle of the night, Bogdan grabs his fire extinguisher and he goes out and he sits in the yard, even in the dead of winter. He is afraid that one of those drones or missiles will be shot down over their home and the debris will fall on Safe Haven and will start a fire and destroy their home. So right now, when I'm recording this, Russia is focusing most of their nightly missile strikes on Ukraine's power infrastructure and Kharkiv, a city to our east that is much closer to Russia and the front lines. Kyiv is still attacked at intervals. Even in the calm times, there's a nagging question of when those massive repetitive barrages will start again. I often lay down at night wondering if tonight will be the night that we're woken up in the middle of the night to the whole building shaking from a nearby strike or an interception. We never forget the war that Russia has brought to this country. One of the questions that we've been getting in the past year is whether the church is being persecuted in Ukraine. Specifically, the stories that is being circulated is that President Zelensky and his administration are using the war to crack down on Christianity. This is a distortion. Ukrainian security forces have arrested a few officials in the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine because they were spreading Russian propaganda. They were found in possession of that propaganda while Ukraine is being actively invaded by Russia. There's also major tension at the moment between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, as you would expect this war to create. The leader of the Russian Orthodox Church in Moscow has declared this a holy war against Ukraine. The fact that Russian invading forces have targeted, tortured, disappeared, and executed Christian leaders of all kinds, they have shut down and destroyed places of worship in occupied territories, this is not receiving the same attention in spite of this being more prevalent and more well documented. The patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine was arrested, but he is being held under house arrest. Russian forces don't show Christian leaders that are on their lists the same consideration. On the other hand, we have always been openly Christian in Ukraine. This has never been a problem. Ukrainians are glad that we're here. Ukraine is very accepting of religious freedom for all, just as long as your religion doesn't call for the destruction of Ukraine and its autonomy. We find it very disheartening that this distortion has gotten spread so widely in the West and specifically in the US. We ask that you pray for us as we settle back into life here. So much has changed. We're connecting to a new church. We're trying to find daycare or babysitter for Oliver and possibly find a preschool for him in September. Jana is starting language lessons again to brush up on her Ukrainian. And we're trying to figure out our new roles and how those roles need to change and what our day-to-day will look like. I'm planning building projects. Oh, and we're starting a new business. It is a lot, and it's pretty overwhelming, especially when on average every third night is disrupted by air raids. We also ask that you pray for our friend and partner Vitalik, who's been drafted. Vitalik and his wife Lena grew up in the orphanage, and then they lived at Safe Haven with Bogdan and Anya. Their lives were completely transformed in this home, and they decided that they wanted to help kids just like them the same way that Anya and Bogdan helped them. They have already served 4 years with a ministry and have had 12 kids in their home. But they wanted a home where their kids would be part of the family long term. They wanted a family, not just a home for kids. And to that end, they bought a small village house, and we were all planning on fixing it up, but then the war started. And Lena and their daughter fled to the Czech Republic, where they are living currently. Vitalik was slowly working on the house, but he was drafted and is now doing his training. After his training is complete, he will be sent to somewhere to serve. At this point, it seems that he may be required to serve in the military for up to 3 years. The family is devastated and really struggling right now. At least when Vitalik first received his draft notice, they both seemed to have resigned themselves to the worst and didn't have much hope for the future. My understanding is that Vitalik is now feeling much more centered, but it's still very scary. Lena and her daughter are the only ones of our group that have remained in the Czech Republic. They currently don't deal with the stresses of living in Ukraine, but they are also isolated from their immediate and their extended family at Safe Haven. And that's taking a toll. This is a very heavy situation that needs a lot of prayer. Another friend of ours, Victor, spent months in the trenches on the front lines. It was scary for all of us. And Jana did a great job of asking people to pray and to keep praying for him. Many in our group feel that his survival was an absolute miracle. And when he came home, I told him that people had been praying for him from around the world. And he told me he knew because he felt those prayers. So thank you, and please don't stop. God bless.